The Rules Committee will come to order. We are here for consideration of H.R. 3630, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2011. We're very happy to welcome the very distinguished chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means, my good friend, Mr. Camp. So please come forward. And we're awaiting the arrival of the ranking member, Mr. Levin. But in light of the fact that we have a quorum here, I certainly wouldn't want to keep any of our members waiting. So we'll say that any prepared statement that you have will without objection appear in the record in its entirety, and we welcome your summary.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me here today to discuss H.R. 3630, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act. There are four important facts about this bill. One, it's about strengthening our economy and getting Americans back to work. Two, it prevents massive cuts to doctors working in the Medicare program to protect America's seniors and the disabled. Three, it adopts a number of the President's legislative initiatives which represent the bipartisan cooperation Americans are demanding. And fourth, it's fully paid for with spending cuts, not job-killing tax hikes. The CBO tables show the bill saves about $1 billion, and when you add in the flood insurance provisions, the savings are closer to $6 billion. While this bill represents the work of a number of committees, many of the provisions in H.R. 3630 are in the jurisdiction of the Ways and Means Committee, and I'm here today to outline those provisions. This bill will extend for 1 year the payroll tax holiday to help middle-class families struggling in this economy. Without an extension, a worker earning $50,000 would see his or her take-home pay decline by about $1,000 in 2012 as compared to 2011. Employers are helped too. Through an extension of 100% expensing, job creators down the supply chain will see more demand for their products, and the President has endorsed both of these policies. The bill will also extend unemployment benefits that are scheduled to expire at the end of the month, but does so while permanently reforming the program and winding down recent expansions of the program. Since 2008, past extensions of unemployment benefits have added $180 billion to the debt. This program, however, is paid for and contains significant reforms, such as one, allowing states to screen and test UI recipients for drug abuse, overturning a 1960s era Department of Labor ban on doing so, requiring all unemployment recipients to 1, search for work, 2, be in a GED program if they've not finished high school, and 3, participate in reemployment services. Implementing program integrity measures and giving states the flexibility to design their own reemployment programs similar to the flexibility the President referenced when discussing the Georgia Works program. In addition to reforming UI, we extend the program but reduce the maximum number of benefit weeks from 99 to 59 by mid-2012. This reflects the normal level typically available following recessions. I should point out that phasing out 20 of those weeks is the President's policy. We also end UI for millionaires. The bill simply says if you earn $1 million, you have to pay back your unemployment benefits. Though not in the jurisdiction of the Ways and Means Committee, the bill applies a similar policy to food stamps. Next, the legislation prevents a 27% cut to doctors serving Medicare patients and replaces it with 1% updates in 2012 and 2013. The 2-year update is the longest that Congress has provided since 2004. Which will give us time to develop a permanent solution. In addition to the Medicare doc fix, the legislation reforms and extends temporary Medicare payment programs. 4 are being extended, and we are making reforms to some of those programs and requiring additional studies from CMS and GAO to get better data about how they're working. These programs are the Therapy Caps Exception Process, QI, ambulance payment add-ons, and geographic payment adjustments for physician office visits, sometimes called GPCI. In the healthcare world, the legislation also adopts a recommendation from President Obama that reduces subsidies to high-income seniors by requiring them to pay a greater share of their Part B and D premiums. This single change reduces spending by $31 billion in the next decade. Saves $13.4 billion in wasteful overpayments of exchange subsidies, similar to previous good government changes enacted by overwhelming bipartisan majorities and signed into law by the President, and repeals provisions in current law that hurt physician-owned hospitals. With regard to the nation's primary welfare program, the legislation extends through September 30th, 2012, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF, which is set to expire on December 31st of this year. The TANF extension includes bipartisan, bicameral reforms to improve program integrity and close the current strip club loophole, ensuring welfare funds cannot be accessed at ATMs in strip clubs, liquor stores, and casinos. Finally, the legislation takes two additional steps to better protect taxpayer dollars. First, it makes a necessary change to the additional child tax credit program by requiring one spouse to include a Social Security number on their tax return to claim the credit, just as you have to do when filing for the Earned Income Tax Credit. Second, this legislation reduces Social Security overpayments by improving the coordination with states and local governments, incorporating another recommendation from President Obama. The Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act incorporates more than a dozen proposals the President has either offered, supported, or signed into law in one variation or another. In fact, more than 90% of the bill is paid for with such policies. The bill is paid for, it's bipartisan, and will help get our economy back on track. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Camp. And I just want to say to you, congratulations. Obviously, we have a really serious. We've just been joined by Mr. Levin. So before I proceed, if you'd like to offer some thoughts, Mr. Camp has completed his testimony, and without objection, any prepared statement that you have, Mr. Levin, will appear in the record, and we welcome your summary. Yep.
Yes. It was the abridged version.
I'm sorry, missed your statement.
I'm not sure you have the phone's
It
on.
is. Well, though I didn't hear the statement, I think the path is clear. And that is, instead of trying to find common ground here, we're headed for a confrontation on the floor tomorrow. The President has already indicated his objection, as we have. So let me just highlight a few of the issues. One relates to unemployment insurance. In this period of historically high unemployment and long-term unemployment, this proposal would reduce the federal program from 73 to 33 weeks.
I think you can move the microphone back this way.
Back? Okay. It's too loud.
Coming through a little too loudly.
So it would cut it more than half. And we don't have the final figures yet, but it is clear that well over 1 million people would be deprived of unemployment insurance at a time when people are looking for work. The estimate is 4 people for every job. And I find this to be, if I might say so, a heartless, and I think a mindless, and I think a reckless way to proceed. So I don't know how that's defended. Also, there are provisions that allow a waiver to 10 states to move away from unemployment insurance altogether. And then there are other provisions I don't understand why they would be there. You lose your benefits unless you're working towards a GED. I think it's important for people to have GEDs, to make that an absolute requirement for unemployment benefits. So I think we're essentially at this moment of the historically highest percentage of people who are unemployed long time. This is in our records. We had none in the Depression. We're essentially cutting the federal program by 40 weeks. the majority of states would be affected, including the state that Mr. Camp and I live in. And I don't see how people can go home and have voted for this and look people in the eye and tell them that they're out in the cold. Essentially, if this were to prevail, for the holiday, you have an empty package. So I very much oppose what's provided here. I think we need to also take a careful look at the health provisions. I think they, in many respects, are a mistake. I don't know if anyone has thought through carefully enough the changes that would be made relating to Medicare, and over time, what would happen to those on Medicare and the premium that they would pay. And while income relating has been discussed by the President, it was part of an effort at a basic reform, and essentially what you would do would be to have a forever provision for senior citizens in terms of their Medicare provision for a 1-year reduction. So some of the extenders are included, but others aren't. And it's hard to understand why some are in there and some are not. In terms of provisions relating to hospitals, I think there is an especially harsh impact by the omission of some of the provisions and the bad debt provision that is in here. And I think it's interesting that someone has inserted in here a provision relating to physician-owned hospitals. This is what we used to call in the Ways and Means Committee a kind of a rifle shot. So we only saw this bill on Friday. There was no effort to sit down and work on this on a bipartisan basis. We're now in the process of working on a substitute, and I would ask this committee to agree to let us present a substitute if that's what we decide to do.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Levin. Appreciate your being here, and I have to say that your testimony was not quite as buoyant and encouraging as the testimony from Mr. Camp, as he is attempting to address, I believe, the exact same goal of ensuring that people do have access to those benefits. But at the same time, if you look at the fact that $180 billion, as he said in his testimony, is what we've seen added to the deficit since we've had this, bringing about reforms, not just GED, but looking at the other kinds of reforms, I think, is a responsible way. So I happen to believe that this is a package that has been discussed and considered for a long period of time. A number of these reforms have been out there. Mr. Camp has been a great proponent of those. And so I will say thanks to both of you. I do believe that the proposal that we will have, you described it as a confrontation. I hope very much that the President will be supportive of this, the Democrats will. I mean, I've heard a number of Democrats talk positively about some of these proposals that have been before us, and so it's my hope that we'll be able to move ahead, get this done, ensuring that the American people who truly are in need will have access to benefits, but at the same time we bring about reforms and, as the title of the bill says, focus on job creation and economic growth, which is...
I don't think cutting 1 million people from unemployment is a reform.
May I finish my statement?
Okay.
Thank you very much. I believe that if we can focus on the issue of job creation and economic growth, getting to the root cause of the problem here, which is, I believe, what this legislation is designed to do, will go a long way towards addressing the concerns of the people about whom you are talking today. And so I I don't have any questions for you gentlemen other than to say thank you very much for being here, and I do appreciate the time and effort, and I hope very much that we can enjoy bipartisan support on this. Mr. Sessions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome both of you, the ranking member and the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, to the Rules Committee. Over the last few weeks, we've had an opportunity to receive a good bit of legislation that has been very important to this committee, to see the direction that this Congress is headed. We've had some success in our ability to more fully understand the ramifications of job creation and the reason why Republicans continue to bring bills to the floor of the House of Representatives with job creation, investment opportunities, tax advantages to employers, and the chance for us to streamline programs to the benefit of employers since our nation is in key need of job employment numbers to rise. I would note today, and I think that the chairman of the committee aptly stated this, that our country is facing a very difficult time with the long-term unemployment that comes as a result of excessive Washington spending, too many rules and regulations, and an administration that I believe is tone deaf in understanding the part of this equation that has contributed to the demise of our economy. Today, I note, Mr. Chairman, that you have brought us a bill that also talks about a Keystone Pipeline, which would be a job creator, which would allow the United States to have an advantage, I believe, in the coming years, if in fact any sort of problem occurred in the Middle East where we had a delay in receiving needed and necessary oil. It would reduce our oil dependency by some 8%, I've been led to believe. It would provide us with a catalyst for many, many more jobs. It would provide us with the opportunity to ensure a stable supply of energy from our neighbors to the north, and would provide this country with the benefit of having less cost in the price at the pump. And so I believe that all of these things added up, along with the compromise, as you suggest, about the things which the President has indicated that the President wanted, are all to a package that, while maybe not perfect, maybe I might not have written everything the same way, I think it's a real advantage. And I wondered if the Chairman would take just a second and highlight those things which might be involved in job creation, job enrichment, and the advantage to taxpayers and consumers with the pipeline.
Thank you, Mr. Sessions. The pipeline issue is not in the jurisdiction of the Ways and Means Committee, but I will tell you that it is one that I think will be very important moving forward, and one I obviously strongly support. And I think the key thing is that we have a decision. It requires that the President issue a permit for the pipeline within 60 days and or find that it's not in the national interest to proceed. Right now, this issue has been delayed until 2013, which, given the difficult nature, as Mr. Levin says, of people's ability to find jobs and the high level of unemployment we have, certainly to have a project of this size and magnitude. I was just at an event this morning with an area chamber of commerce in my district, and they talked about the jobs it would create in Michigan if, in fact, this pipeline were to go forward because of the manufacturing side of things in our own state. So it would be a very positive thing in terms of obviously energy independence, but also for much-needed job creation. I think that's why you're seeing groups as varied as the Teamsters and the AFL-CIO come on board and say it's just essential that we have this pipeline. And what this says is that a decision needs to be made. It's not enough just to wait until 2013 and pass this along. There's tens of thousands of miles of pipeline under this area in Oklahoma already that is of concern, and we just think it is so important for jobs moving forward. I'm glad it was included in the bill, and look forward to supporting it strongly on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I believe the kinds of legislation that Republican chairmen have been bringing to the Rules Committee once again highlight the commitment that I believe your party and my party has to putting ideas forth on the table that will provide us an opportunity also for us to have an agenda to work with the President. I believe job creation is among the most important. I want to thank both of you for being here today, and I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. As I get ready to recognize the ranking member, I'm happy to welcome Bob Slaughter to the Rules Committee once again. I know he had no difficulty finding the hearing room. He's been here many times. We're happy to have him, and Merry Christmas to you. And Ms. Slaughter.
Actually, he does. We discussed it pretty thoroughly on a 9-mile ride down from Rochester to Washington.
Represented his interest very well.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate both of you. Gentlemen, I agree with Mr. Levin that there's not a whole lot we're going to be able to do here. I do think that this is one of the most punishing bills I've ever seen. We're saying to people that are unemployed, how dare you lose your job? With the nerve of some people to lose their job. Well, we're not going to help you out a bit. I can't understand that kind of attitude. They're suffering enough out there, and yet we're saying we don't care about it. We've already invited the nation scorn during the debt limit debate and the CR continuing resolution crisis. And now you are returning to the well with the same exact brinksmanship that led to our nation's credit downgrade. Now, instead of extending a tax cut to the middle class and assistance to the unemployed, which normally the Congress of the United States would do without a whole lot of grief, the majority is holding the middle class hostage in order to extract concessions for their friends in big oil. And furthermore, instead of asking those with the most to help those with the least, today's bill asks millions of seniors to pay more for health care to pay for it. And in exchange, the majority will graciously continue the federal unemployment insurance programs, even though they are cut by more than half for the maximum number of weeks the benefits provided from these programs as a usual matter. They cut these needed benefits during one of the longest economic slumps in American history, and Paul Krugman, Nobel laureates of great economists, said today we are in a depression. Adding to the fact that the United States economy is in such bad shape, what the economies of Europe, and are concerned about them. Why can't this grand old party help the middle class without demanding a quid pro quo? Why can't they serve the middle class without playing Secret Santa for special interests, like the Keystone XL? We don't know where that oil is going to go. I've heard most people say that once it moves itself across the United States and is refined in Texas, it will be put on ships and likely sent to Asia. It would be nice if we knew that before we insisted on putting that pipeline through. The good news is the majority's holiday giveaways will never make it past our colleagues in the Senate, and they face a near certain presidential veto. And with any luck, this bad movie will come to an end and we can finally take serious steps to help the middle-class families and provide unqualified assistance to the unemployed who are struggling simply just to live. Thank you very much. I have no questions. I don't think it would matter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is amazing the use of language in this committee. I think there probably is no committee that has more distortion of the American language, the English language, than here in the committee. But I wanted to go over some points with the Chairman for a moment and ask him if I have the essence of this bill, because I think it is important that we emphasize that. But before I do that, the comments the ranking member made me think that we must always remind our colleagues about a little history. When they took over the Congress in January 2007, we had a 4.5% unemployment rate. And so while they decry the unemployment rate, we have to remind the American people that it's a result of their policies that we have such a high unemployment rate. It was only after they took over the Congress that the unemployment rate started going up, and it was a pretty close correlation with their policies on spend that we saw the unemployment rate go up. But, Mr. Chairman, check me if I'm wrong, because as I talk to the people in my district, I want to be able to give, again, the essence of this bill. I want to boil it down as much as I possibly can. First of all, the policies here are bipartisan. I believe I heard you say that 90% of what's being proposed has been proposed by either the President or our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It reduces waste, fraud, and abuse in several different areas. It reduces unnecessary rules and regulations. It helps to create an environment where jobs can be created so that we can go off after this horrible unemployment rate created by our friends across the aisle who so much decry these policies. It will deal with something that my constituents are very concerned about, and I get a lot of letters about, and that is drug screening that would be required before people can draw these generous benefits that they get. It will help us bring down energy costs. It will help the unemployed get skills that they need. I see all over my district, I see advertisements for jobs all the time. So it's a little hard for me to understand why we have such a high unemployment rate. It cuts the deficit, and contrary to what our colleagues said, it really asks the wealthy to do more in terms of paying for their benefits. Tell me, what have I left out, Mr. Camp, in trying to summarize this?
Well, you've hit on a lot of the points. 90% of the bill that funds the bill are from the President's bipartisan policies. But let me just say, and particularly with regard to UI, it is very important that the unemployment insurance program not just be about writing checks, but be about finding reemployment for people who are out of work. And that's why it's paired with the reforms that are, I think, needed in this program. One, having a meaningful requirement to search for work. There's a patchwork quilt of responsibilities, and my friends on the other side made basically the entire, after the average of 26 weeks, all a federal program in terms of unemployment benefits. This was shared between state and federal. Because it has become, with stimulus, virtually all a federal program beyond 26 weeks, we think it's important to have a standardization in terms of work requirements, searching for work. Obviously, there are exceptions to the GED requirement if, in fact, a recipient is too old. So we've tried to bring some common sense exceptions to some of these requirements. But if you don't have a job, it's so important to get the kind of training and skills and get that GED so that you will be employable in the future. States have been really asking for the flexibility to be able to do these reemployment programs that, if they apply, they can receive waivers for. I think that's going to be essential to actually getting people who are receiving a benefit into the job market. And one of the concerns, the President has suggested reducing this program by 20 weeks. And we think it's important to go back to the historical level of 59 weeks, which is more than half of the current plan. So my colleagues are wrong when they say this is cutting this by more than half. That's just not accurate.
I said the federal program, Mr. Camp.
Well,
The federal program is 73 weeks. It's cut to 33.
You'll have an opportunity. The entire program will be 59 weeks, but four states, even after 6 months, this is a gradual phase down to 59 weeks. Many more states will be at 79 weeks, and at the end, 4 states will still stay on a 79-week plan. But it's important because I hear from many employers and business people saying, look, 99 weeks is just too long because people are out of the market for too long. They lose their skill set, and then the fast-changing economy, we need to have an effort to really get them back, get them ready for work, get them back into the workforce sooner than that. This goes down to the historical level that of past recessions. If you look at 82, 92, this is more the historical level of unemployment benefits that were offered. And in the 80s, the recession unemployment rates spiked up as high as they have been in this long recession. So I think this particularly, yes, they're higher, but in 82. But the unemployment benefit level was about where we hope to move to. But it's a gradual phase down to it. It's not all at once, and I think it's an important thing to do. So I think particularly on the unemployment side, And we're extending benefits here to more than 5 million recipients. They want to talk about who's being denied, but we're extending these unemployment benefits, and we're paying for it. And we're not doing it in an irresponsible way, which added $180 billion to the deficit over the 9 various extensions that were given since 2008.
Well, I can remember when unemployment benefits were 11 weeks. I was never on unemployment, but my father was, and I remember it very well when it was only 11 weeks. And then it gradually got more and more and more and more. And I think what you're doing is the appropriate thing to do. And I want to say I appreciate what you and the committee staff and the other committee members have done in order to bring us what I think is a very sensible bill, which attacks, again, provides much to the American people without adding to the deficit, which we know is the biggest concern that people have.
The other thing we do is we add data standardization, which is a bipartisan proposal to really get at the waste and fraud and abuse in some of these programs. Some of it is checks are going to the wrong people. It's not all fraud, but some of it is fraud. And if we can standardize the data, we can actually bring program integrity to this program. It's something very important that we do. We also deny unemployment insurance to millionaires. That's a loophole that's been allowed. There's actually been if we enact this provision, it reduces federal deficits by $20 million between 2012 and 2021. So a significant number of millionaires have been receiving unemployment insurance. We think that is wrong. We think that should be stopped. That's part of the reforms we're trying to bring to this program.
Accountability is another issue that's major with, I think, our constituents in bringing some accountability. I think the approach that we take to not give benefits to people of means as opposed to taking more money from those people to give to the federal government when there is no accountability is the right approach. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Let me just begin by making it clear that there are millions of people in this country who are struggling, and they have been waiting for us to do something, to help them out, to help them get through this difficult time as they look for a job. And really, it's shameful that we're here at this late hour trying to find a way to extend a helping hand to people in need, trying to find a way to extend a payroll tax cut to middle-class families. We should have done this a long time ago. But before I get into the substance, let me just talk a little bit about the process here. It is my understanding that this bill was presented on Friday. Am I correct on that? Yes. Okay, just a couple of days ago. It is also my understanding that this bill has been referred to 12 out of 21 committees. Am I correct on that? That's half the committees, and so it's been referred to. And how many hearings on this presented bill have we had over the weekend? Has there been a markup on this? One of the committees, by the way, is the Rules Committee. We didn't do a hearing or a markup on this bill either. This bill, just so my colleagues can understand, I want to make sure they understand this, is 369 pages. It's double on both sides. Here it is. Already I understand there's one drafting error that is pretty substantial that needs to be fixed with a self-executing rule here, an amendment to be automatically put in. I don't know how many other errors are in here as we put this thing together in this rapid fashion. I point this out because I recall that the Republican Pledge to America, which stated that they will end the practice of packaging unpopular bills with must-pass legislation to circumvent the will of the American people. Instead, we will advance major legislation one issue at a time. But that's a broken promise. That promise has been broken with this monstrosity that we have here today. I don't know how many other mistakes are in this bill that are going to have to be fixed at a later date. But I remind my colleagues that there was a time when they were concerned about bills of this magnitude being rushed to the House floor without proper vetting. I mean, there's no hearings, no markups. Half the committees in this entire House of Representatives received a referral for this bill, including the Rules Committee. And here we are, bringing this bill to the floor. Over the weekend, I was, before I understood what was happening here, I was a little bit heartened because I heard the Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, and I heard that the Speaker of the House had said that they, at long last, favor an extension of the payroll tax cut and an extension of unemployment insurance. But I'm a little bit puzzled. If they're for these things, then why are they demanding a ransom in order for us to get these things? And it's a pretty big ransom here. My ranking member, Mr. Slaughter, mentioned a number of them, but this bill is pretty comprehensive. I mean, it rolls back a host of Clean Air Act rules promulgated by the EPA. I don't even know which ones they are. I mean, this is being rushed to the floor, but I'm told that in this bill there's a number of rollbacks. There are changes in terms of of eligibility for certain benefits that, again, one would like to think would have to go through a very thoughtful hearing process before they're all of a sudden, made into law. We've got, a whole bunch of policy riders in here, but basically, in order for middle-class families, to not pay higher taxes next year, and in order to make sure that people who are unemployed get something, although it's been much reduced, as Mr. Levin pointed out, and in order to make sure that seniors, have access to doctors through Medicare, that in order to get that, we've got to dismantle the Clean Air Act, dismantle health care reform, force approval of a massive controversial oil pipeline, and make it harder for working families to claim the child tax credit, and more and more and more. My expectation is that this is so off the mark that, as the ranking member said, that the Senate will not approve this. But that we're wasting time as we're coming to the end of the year, going through this exercise. Maybe it's some red meat for the base, but I think people are tired of that at this point. I think they want us to simply do what is right, and that is to extend the payroll tax cut, to help people with their unemployment insurance, and to get this doc fix in place so we can move on and, and hopefully actually do something about jobs. I strongly disagree, with the statements of my colleagues on the Republican side that this Congress is about jobs. It has been about everything but jobs. And I think that the record on job creation out of this Congress is lousy. And I hope that, once we get through all this, that perhaps we will get serious about the issue of jobs and putting people back to work. But this is like political extortion. If we would accept this, it's to accept all these other provisions that have nothing to do with what the issue at hand is, which is middle class tax relief, and helping people with unemployment insurance and getting this doc fix in place. But all this other stuff is like, again, look at how long. Who's read this? Who's had a chance to go over this? One drafting error already. I don't know how many more are going to be in here. This is not the way we should be doing this, and I regret very much that we're not dealing with a clean bill. We're dealing with this Christmas tree. I guess we'll bring it to the floor tomorrow and dispose of it one way or the other, and then have to come back here if we're serious about providing a middle class extension of the middle class tax relief. We'll have to come back here and do it again. Mr. Levin.
I just want to read the number of states that would lose 40 weeks of federal unemployment benefits next year under the bill. Alabama, California, Connecticut, D.C., Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, Nevada, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Washington, and the other states would lose between 14 and 34. So when it comes to unemployment insurance, this is the opposite of a Christmas tree.
Right.
And I just want to say one word to take Michigan as an example. In a misguided way, the state reduced the state benefit to 20 weeks. You had 33 to 20, that's 53. And some of those 53 weeks under our federal program will be diminished. This, Mr. Dreyer, is the highest number of long-term unemployed in the record of this country. So to compare it with early 2000, the 90s and the 80s, in terms of long-term unemployed, is frightfully misguided. The problem we have...
Gentleman yield, all I was saying was that the unemployment rate was higher in the 1980s than it is today.
But it lasted, but take how long it's lasted.
And as many on your side said, if we only passed stimulus, our unemployment rate would be 6%.
Okay, look, we can argue, I'll take
So your
back my time.
policies certainly haven't worked very well.
Let's not argue about the policies, because I think you're wrong.
It's a fact.
Focus on the
promised
unemployed.
6% unemployment.
Look,
You
focus
didn't
on
get
the
it.
unemployed in the state of Michigan.
I am focused on the unemployed, and
You're
frankly,
not.
had we not passed the stimulus bill, we'd have been better off.
Gentlemen, let me say that there
Okay,
appears to be a little
I appreciate
disagreement
your yielding
within
to
the
me, Mr.
leadership of the Ways and Means Committee. Mr. McGovern, do you have any more questions you'd like to ask?
I do, yeah.
Okay,
No,
please proceed. And
I don't want to get into policy either, because I don't think the Bush tax cuts produced any jobs, and I do think the stimulus package actually helped us avoid even a worse catastrophe. But as this sluggish economy is trying to get better, and I hope it is getting better slowly but surely, there are millions of people who are struggling. And for the life of me, I can't understand why it is always so hard in this House of Representatives, under this leadership, to help the middle class and to help those who are poor. It is always so difficult to be able to move anything forward. And again, the price that we're supposed to pay in order to move some very flawed help forward the way it's drafted here, I think this is going to be dead when it goes to the Senate. We're going to have to come back here, and I regret we're wasting our time.
Could I just ask the gentleman, does the gentleman believe that we should be at 99 weeks with no reforms in the program?
What I believe is we should be focused here about trying to help create jobs so that people can go out and find them. Unlike Dr. Fox, in my district, there aren't all these jobs available for people to take to be able to support their families. It's still a very sluggish economy, and our unemployment rate, by the way, is better than most of the other states in the country. So what I'm saying to the gentleman is that, we're all talking about jobs today. We got to do something about jobs, and allowing people who can't find a job to all of a sudden be cut off of unemployment, and how they're going to survive and support their families and pay their mortgages and all that kind of stuff. I think they won't. These are extraordinary times, and quite frankly, we need to be focused on measures to get people back to work. And we've done everything in this House, from reaffirm our national motto to make it easier for unsafe people to carry guns across state lines. But farm dust, which is not a problem, and everywhere I go, people say, "When are you going to do something about jobs?" So, let's extending the payroll tax for middle-class families is very helpful during this economy. Helping people, who are unemployed get through this difficult time until they can find a job would be very helpful. And I think we should do the rest of this stuff. I don't know what. And again, you know what? Then maybe there needs to be some reforms, Mr. Camp. But not a single hearing on this bill. Not a single hearing. And half the committees in this Congress had this bill referred to them. I mean, let's do this thoughtfully. Not in the back room where a couple of people make the decisions. Let's bring this through committee, through regular order, and let's see whether we can improve the system. I yield back my. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman. I forget the area in which I am. Before I give my campaign speech, I do have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. First of all, Mr. Chairman, how long has this bill been online?
5 days.
Okay.
4 days.
which exceeds what we said we're going to. And thank you. Ms. Fox already said, or asked you the question, that 90% of this has been some part of a bipartisan agreement. My friend from Massachusetts was complaining about the length of this. This bill is still smaller than some of the amendments that were thrown at us on the day of the debate on that amendment. So I'm glad that we're actually putting this online for 5 days so people, or 6 days when we do it, so people finally have a way of looking at this.
Would
I had
the
a-
gentleman yield a second?
If I must. Apparently I
And
must.
let me point out that there are 13 Democrat amendments to this bill, so obviously a lot of people had a chance to read it and decide on offering amendments.
Well, maybe, and maybe that's a nice segue into the question I have for you, Mr. Camp, because it was alluded that no one's actually been looking at this bill or hearing it, reading it. I understand, you have the Keystone Pipeline Division. Am I wrong in saying that we actually did discuss that one and pass it on the floor? Well, then
That
let's
has been publicly
let me
debated
just hit a
on
few
the
of
House
these, and
floor.
you can tell me if we've actually talked
Yes.
about these in the
Will
past.
the gentleman yield to me?
Not yet. Let me get through
I
this.
just want to know if it's the same bill, that's all.
Let me get through this, please. And you've had 5 days to look at it. I think we can do that. The Boiler MAC bill, that Boiler MAC provision, was that also a bill that's passed this House?
The gentleman's
It's a
correct.
bipartisan vote.
Bipartisan vote and passed the House already.
So the unemployment insurance reform, is that similar to 1745 that went through the Ways and Means Committee?
Yes, the reforms that are incorporated here are reforms that were aired in open hearing in a markup in the Ways and Means
All right,
Committee.
let me go through a couple of others. I'll try and move this faster so we can get through this before votes take place. The Spectrum, Jumpstarting Opportunity for Broadband Spectrum, was that heard in a subcommittee and marked up?
In a different committee, but yes, I understand.
Okay,
that's
how
correct.
about the changes to temporary assistance for needy families? Was H.R. 2883 part of this bill that was also marked up in a committee?
This has been, it's a bipartisan reauthorization.
What about the
and has
strip
had strong
club
bipartisan
loophole?
support.
Was that part of Senate Bill 943 that's gone through
Correct.
the Senate?
The gentleman's correct.
Then what about the Flood Insurance Reform Act that did with the flood insurance part? Was that part of 1309 that was?
I believe the gentleman's correct on that.
So the Preventing Abuse and the Refundable Child Tax Credit, that was part of Mr. Johnson's bill that was introduced on May of this year?
Yeah, that's been introduced for many months.
All right. So I guess the bottom line is this bill has had a few discussions as time has gone on. But I did want to ask another question, if I could, that nobody here has addressed, and it was something that I found of interest to me, and I wish you had up, because it is a significant issue. So, Mr. Camp, the offset that is in part of this bill that deals with federal employees as far as the freezing of their COLA, I've heard this has been 3 years. Is this a 3-year provision, or is this the third year of a 3-year provision?
It extends through December 31st, 2013, the COLA freeze on federal civilian employees as well as members of Congress.
So this is a third year?
Yes.
Then, and
Correct.
this has been across the board with all federal workers. But let me, this is where the speech comes in. Before I came here, I was a public school teacher. I'm still listed in those rankings as one of the least financially well-off members of Congress, so I guess I'm appreciative of the idea that I'm now one of the rich people around here. It's nice to be called that, even though that's not true. But I do understand the feelings of those who are in this situation, especially when they have decisions imposed top-down manner upon them. So the extensions that we're talking about here for the tax breaks, it's wise. The programs in here that will create jobs, that's wise. Having offsets in here for the program, especially in the financial situation we're in, it's wise. And the fact that you are trying to share the burden with everyone, including members of Congress, I find that wise. I do wish, though, that this COLA freeze on civilian workers was actually not part of the extension that was here. When the Obama administration first proposed this, I wish they had come up with something a little bit more original than simply putting a freeze on salaries of all those who work for the federal government, because our goal should be not simply a temporary budget practice that can be reversed, but to actually do some kind of long-term reduction. Now, I know in our code we already provide goals and bonuses to people within the agencies within the federal government to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse. But we're The federal government's big. There will always be waste, fraud, and abuse in anything we do because we're just that big. What I would like to see is some kind of systemic practice that has changed. For example, the Air Force, in their depot work, decided to implement ideas of the Lean program, sometimes called Six Sigma, or a theory of constraint, all of them tied together. But what they basically did is go to the people who are on the ground who know what was going and allow them to come up with a way that would reduce costs and increase efficiencies, and they did it extremely well. That same program, which actually should be done by the administration, but that same program could easily be imposed on every element of the federal government, on every workforce, to try to reduce the footprint, which is simply the space we rent for these programs, our supply cost, efficiency in responding, even the number of personnel that we have using programs. If we were to actually empower citizens, we could allow them to be rewarded for finding ways of cutting the spending and giving them financial bonuses for doing that. Not just for waste, fraud, and abuse, not just a temporary freeze, but actually allowing them to go forward and find efficiencies within the system. I had intended to attempt an amendment to this process. I realize that this ought to be something that is pushed by the administration. This is clearly an executive branch function. However, it's not being done. I realize Mr. Latham and Mr. Burgess have bills to try and encourage this. I would like to go one step further and allow the opportunity for Congress to establish a reward system to allow our employees to find ways of receiving bonuses by finding the efficiencies within the system for a truly systemic change in what's going on. And I intend to take their bill and basically introduce something in January where we can get the words accurate and right, so that next year we can do it, so that we can come up with some truly long-term reforms. Because I am frustrated with the temporary freeze that we place on people who are what I was before. I don't think that is the proper approach. I was frustrated when Mr. President Obama decided to incorporate that as one of his ideas. I think we can do better, and we ought to do better, and we should work to do better. And I think in the next session, I would be very happy if we could all sit down and try and come up with a program that actually empowers our citizens and our workers to find ways of being more efficient, to create real long-term changes in the way we do things. I'll yield back because I've rambled too long.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. Let me just say that we have votes coming up in just a few minutes on the floor, and I'm hoping very much that we might have an opportunity to report this measure out before the end of the last vote. Mr. Hastings.
Mr. Chairman, the entirety of my service on the Rules Committee has been with you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Slaughter, and Mr. McGovern. We've all been here a number of years, during the times of Democratic control of the House of Representatives and Republican control of the House of Representatives. If I've learned nothing, I've learned during that period of time that promises made are not always promises kept. And I ask you, Mr. Chairman, did your party, when you gained control of the House of Representatives, make a pledge to America that said that must-pass legislation would be taken one at a time? And do you, Mr. Chairman, consider this to be must-pass legislation?
Yes. I thank my friend for yielding. Let me just say that I think that it's very apparent. I don't know exactly. Must-pass legislation can be characterized in any way. I mean, someone can determine something as must-pass legislation, and somebody else may be virulently opposed to it and doesn't believe that it must pass. So, I mean, I think that that's in the eye of the beholder. The other point that I would make is that we have a crisis here. Mr. Levin and Mr. Camp have both talked about the imperative that we face to try and get this economy growing and generate jobs. We also are approaching the end of the year. As you know, this coming Friday, we have the continuing resolution that expires. We very much want to ensure that we don't see the expiration of those benefits for people who are unemployed, and that we extend the payroll tax holiday. And so there are lots of things that I believe Democrats and Republicans alike want to have happen. We believe very strongly that getting to the core issue of creating jobs is essential, and that's the reason that the bipartisan Keystone Pipeline issue is part of it. So I would say that we're at the end of the session. I don't want to get into the position of comparing. Mr. Bishop alluded to what we had in the past. I can tell you about sitting here in the last 4 years about instances, but I just don't want to point the finger of blame and say, well, but I think that independently, while we've not been perfect, I believe that we actually have done better than we'd seen in the 4 years before. We have had more amendments considered on the House floor in the first 9 months of this year than we did the entire last Congress. I mean, we're trying to make as many amendments in order for members as possible. And I will admit that it hasn't been perfect, but I'm trying my doggone
Thank
it.
you,
So
Mr.
thank my
Chairman.
friend for
Mr.
yielding.
Chairman, you made my point, and that is that you've broken your pledge. And that's your prerogative. You made my point when you spoke of the things that are imperatives. And those imperatives we all know, and I think we all agree that they must pass measures. This Congress, in the 20 years that I'm here, again, if I've learned nothing, I've learned that it has a bad case of deadline-itis. And it seems to me that we can't get anything done. Now, all of us knew everything that is in this measure. Those that may have passed the House of Representatives, and footnote right there, the measure that passed the House of Representatives is not the measure that is the Keystone provision that is in this particular 369 pages. Is there someone that can tell me something different? Perhaps you can, Mr. Chairman. Is the Keystone provision in here the one that passed the House of Representatives?
That issue is not in the jurisdiction of our committee.
I understand, but Mr. Chairman, you're bringing, Dave, you're bringing this to us. I consider you to be one of the most thoughtful people in Congress. And I know when you come here, and the same goes for Mr. Levin, that you come here with an honest assessment of your legislation. I know the committee that it came from. It came from Commerce and Energy. But this is your bill. This is no longer their bill.
Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask if answer my question.
Well, I mean, let me just say, this is not within his jurisdiction if you're still talking about the Keystone Pipeline, and I wanted to say that I've just been informed by staff that the measure in here on the Keystone Pipeline is what passed the House.
Mr. Chairman,
I thank my friend for yielding.
when we go to vote, I will come back and ask you for time to point out to you that it is not the provision. Now, it's easy to say something, but let's go back and we'll go and get the provision that came in here, and then we'll deal with it. But before too much more time goes, my good friend Mr. Bishop pointed out his lack of wealth, and he and I don't agonize about that. We are glad to have a good job, and we do have, as far as pay is concerned, a good job. But he and I are categorized as among the poorest people in Congress. As a matter of fact, poorest people in Congress is what they say. That's what the Hill and all them people that write about it say. But I don't mind that. As a matter of fact, if I read the book as I did over the weekend, throw them all out. It kind of is interesting that a lot of people came here as poor as you and me. And somehow or another, in the course of time, those that are not here and a few that are did pretty good. But I guess the point that I want to make is more important, and that is that when we address things, we should do so differently. For example, there's been a harangue about wealth and the need for wealthy people to pay, and it comes to play here in this particular measure with reference to Medicare as one thing and pay-fors. And those pay-fors, Democrats believe should be directed toward wealthy people. And I think rightly so. And I believe most wealthy people would agree. Let's use, for example, the wealthiest person in Congress is reputed to be worth more than $350 million. That's money that he has today. All right? I don't know what he paid in taxes, but I'll make it even more personal. Last year, I paid $41,000 in United States income taxes. Now, all I have is the little deduction on my mortgage. I used to have a lot of deductions when my mom was alive because of her end-stage medical circumstances. All my children are grown, so I don't have any of those deductions. And I don't own a single stock or bond. The Dow goes up and down, and I go around and around and around. Only stock I have is in over-the-counter, and that's groceries. So when the deal goes down here, the wealthiest man in Congress is worth more than $350 million. If his next year income, let's assume it's a pittance, is only $10 million, and we return him to the Clinton tax period where the tax rate was 39.6, then he'd pay about $3 million and would still have $350 million. What's wrong with asking that person to do that? And guess what? I would not mind, even though I paid $41,000, I wouldn't mind paying $50,000 if it meant that there was going to be some more availability for people to get job opportunities. Chairman Camp, is there a directed method that you have required or asked CBO to undertake in this measure? And if I'm correct, it addresses the cuts but does not address spending?
There is a CBO analysis that basically, in summary, says that the bill reduces the deficit by about $1 billion. If the flood insurance provision is also included, it's about a $6 billion reduction in the deficit.
But isn't there, at the end of the bill, a directed scoring provision telling OMB and CBO that they have to count savings in the bill but not count spending?
Well, the directed scoring is for a 10-year overview of the bill, and that's what CBO also gives.
What's your take on that, Mr. Levin?
Frankly, I don't know what to make of it. It's a little hard to know what to make of a number of these provisions in the bill, which we saw on Friday. And we have spent a lot of time trying to understand the ramifications of it.
But is there a directed spending measure, the directed measure to OMB and CBO?
Apparently.
It is?
Apparently.
Yes. All right, that's the point that I wish to make. It's strange, and it's at the end of the provision. I'd also ask you, Chairman Camp, I believe that there are a significant number of immigrant families who already pay taxes, and the measure as offered with the tax identification number instead of a Social Security number, do you believe that that would make those people ineligible for a tax credit?
This is the child tax credit. This is the same reform that we've applied to the earned income tax credit, where one of the filers has to have a Social Security number and disclose it. So we're bringing the reform that is in the ITC to the refundable child tax credit, and simply says one parent. And over time, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of filers who receive this, and there's a concern that with filing for this without forwarding or bringing forward a Social Security number, and this has caused concern that there's some program integrity concerns.
But do you see that the tax credits could benefit the children who are citizens? And what I'm getting at is, we throw these numbers around about how many people are undocumented and what have you. I don't think we really know all of the answers to that. But I see this as something that will affect well over 1 million and probably as many as 2 million immigrants. But I move on to Keystone. Why didn't we approach this from the standpoint of build the portions that are environmentally sound and then go forward? And for the life of me, don't understand why we do things the way that we do. Those of us that know about potable fresh water, those of us that know about aquifers and the importance, that's why Nebraska raised their issues, is because they may very well have aquifer problems. So then the thing needs to go around that if it's going to be built. And I just don't understand why we can't do it. I guess we would be like Melbourne in Australia as Democrats and Melbourne and Sydney in Australia, Democrats and Republicans. Melbourne and Sydney built railroad tracks that when they got to each other, whatever those things are called, didn't match. But I think the pipeline could be built in the safest parts and dealt with at other points in time, even though overall I'm opposed to it. Here's the problem. This thing is extremely complex. It is the end of the year. It is not going to pass the Senate. The President has said that he would reject it, and I just feel that we can do better, should do better, must do better. It is must-pass legislation, and despite my chairman's assertions, it is a clear example of promises made, promises not kept. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
As I said, I hope very much that we'll have an opportunity to move to the floor for votes, and you've both been very patient, and I appreciate it. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, Mr. Camp, for having an open ear. There's been a lot of discussion about how this bill got to be the bill that it is today. I don't envy you in your role putting together the tax provisions and the unemployment provisions and the Social Security provisions, but I do appreciate your willingness to listen and take input and work that out as best you can. Mr. Levin opened his comments saying this bill was heartless, mindless, and reckless. I don't know how you have a discussion on policy when that's the starting point that folks begin in. Mr. McGovern used the word shameful.
I was talking about the unemployment.
We were together on the floor just the other day, renaming a room in honor of a congressional staffer killed in the line of duty, and plea after plea after plea was made on the House floor for toning down the rhetoric, for toning it down, for focusing on the policies that matter, that affect hardworking American taxpayers, focusing on the things that we can do with the responsibility that we have been blessed with here in town, but toning down the rhetoric. And I think about the challenge that you had in crafting this bill, Mr. Chairman, and having to do it against that constant drumbeat, not of helpful comments, not of constructive criticism, but of attack after attack after attack. Now, that said, I'm not happy with everything that's in the bill. I know you didn't sit down to craft it and say, I hope Mr. Woodall is going to be delighted with everything. That's a high bar to meet. But I think, for me, the biggest expenditure in here is the 2% reduction in payroll taxes. I appreciated Mr. Bishop going through all the things that had been discussed before, but to my knowledge, you all have not had any hearings on the impact of the 2% reduction in the payroll tax on the Social Security Trust Fund. Am I right about that?
No, because it's an extension of current policy.
And I appreciate your paying for it and trying to focus on where that is. But so let me go to you, Mr. Levin. When you all had hearings last year before you created this policy, what did you find? I was not here. What did you find was going to be the impact of this 2% reduction, this 33% reduction in an individual's contribution to their retirement?
The answer is that there are differences of opinion, but no one has come up with a better proposal relating to trying to stimulate job growth than this. And while there's some disagreement, Mark Zandi, for example, has estimated that this can add a percentage point to GDP and add over 1 million jobs. And he's not the only one. So my guess is that, look, I think most Republicans, will vote for it.
But I've read that literature as well, folks from the outside the Hill who've made those estimates. But the chairman's telling me that he didn't have a hearing on it because all he was doing is extending the policy that you created. I mean, when you brought in the Social Security experts last year before implementing this policy, what did they say this was going to do to the fundamentals of the Social Security Trust Fund? I'm thinking
the answer is that the money will be paid to the Social Security Fund to make up any difference. That's an obligation of this government. It will not undercut the Social Security Fund. And those of you who have talked about creating jobs haven't been able to come up with a single idea that would begin to possibly have the impact that continuing this proposal will have in terms of putting money into the pockets of people and having them spend it like unemployment insurance. In my language about mindless and heartless related to the unemployment insurance, because in my judgment, as I've talked to numerous people, and we've gotten stories from hundreds of people, these are people who are looking for work and can't find it. And for us to diminish this in 40 states, cutting the federal program by 40 weeks, in my judgment, is heartless. It's also reckless in terms of economic growth, because when people get an unemployment insurance, they spend it. And all my suggestion is that everybody go home and talk to the unemployed.
there was a time in this country where putting money in people's pockets would absolutely have an impact on the economy, and you could see that. I do worry today as I take the money that gets put in my pocket. I'm a beneficiary of this 2% reduction too. I'm not entirely sure why, but I am.
You're not the typical middle-class family.
I go to the store and shop, and I see goods made in China. I see goods made in Taiwan, and I think, for Pete's sakes, why in the world are we stimulating consumption of folks who can't find work because we're shopping with goods made overseas instead of stimulating job creation with those very same dollars to give folks a job? I do talk to the unemployed folks in my community, and I have not found one who said, you know what I'd rather have, Rob? I'd rather have the unemployment check than a job. I'd rather you spend your time and resources in Washington, Rob, working to extend my unemployment checks than to create an environment in which we can grow jobs. Not one do I find.
Do both.
There's a provision in this bill that says if you're on unemployment, it was 99 weeks last time, be 59 weeks this time, 79 weeks in states with high unemployment. If you were on unemployment, if you were once working, but you are now not working, and you cannot find a job, but you do not have a high school education, we want you to use your time to better yourself and get a GED. To better yourself and get a GED. Why? Because we want to get involved in people's business? No, because we know for a fact that if you do not have a high school education, when tough times come, and they are here now and they will come again, you are more likely to get laid off than those folks who do. We know that to be true.
Look, Mr. Woodall, if I might say, look, I'm in favor of giving people money for training and retraining. The bill that was proposed in your budget would have cut training and retraining programs for the people of this country. So you can't tell people like me we need funds for training and retraining when we have fought to get money to have people trained, and your party in the budget wanted to cut.
No. What I can tell people like you, though, Mr. Levin, is that this amendment came to the floor of your committee last year. And I just happen to know because the gentleman who sat in my seat brought this amendment to say if you're going to be on unemployment for 99 weeks, use that time to ensure that you don't end up on unemployment again. And it did not get one Democratic vote in your committee, not one. And so I say there is no one who is more of a champion for extending the checks that go out of this door than you are. But we need more champions on Capitol Hill who are going to extend a job-creating environment so that we don't have to send these checks out. It gives me no sense of pride that we're providing more unemployment checks than ever before in the history of this country. That doesn't give me a sense of pride. If we were providing more jobs than ever before in the history of this country, that would give me pride. If we were providing an environment that offered more entrepreneurial opportunity than ever before in this country, that would give me a sense of reward.
Do both, Mr. Woodall. Do both.
Well, and this bill is a step in that direction. As much as I wish it did a little more in some places and a little less in others, Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful to you for taking Mr. Levin's advice and trying to focus on both of those goals at the same time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I sat in a small diner in Junction City, Kansas, right before Thanksgiving, waiting for my youngest son to come home from Iraq. In the conversation that was in that diner, now I'm just sitting there minding my own business, having a muffin, drinking a cup of coffee. They're talking about the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline in particular, and they don't know me from Adam's house cat, but they're talking about the benefits to Kansas. They saw the opportunity to put more Kansans back to work. So when I hear people say that, this really isn't going to create jobs, we know it is because you can see manufacturing in the Gulf states that actually manufacture the pipe that's going to be utilized to build this pipeline. It's been, how long has that been languishing?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I know it's at least been since we've had legislation in the House. I don't know how long before that.
Well, I believe it's been sitting in study after study after study for at least 3 years. And now we're sitting here talking about jobs. And it is. I think we all are concerned that we need jobs. But, I talk to small businesses back home. And, I hold foreclosure seminars, which are not the most pleasant thing to do. And we talk to businesses, and we talk to those that are unemployed, and they want a job. The problem that we're hearing from our small businesses is that, they're not qualified for the job. They don't have the skills for the job. Or there's a whole bunch that really, there's a number that don't want a job. And so we're competing against, I don't know how to classify it, but, at the end of the day, we're talking about, my estimation, a flawed policy when it started, and Mr. Woodall hit on it in regards to what was the impact as it relates to when you cut the unemployment tax. And we're talking about how we're going to pay for it. We're talking about doing just that, to extend what our friends did last year, but doing it with a pay for. Why is that so hard? I mean, why is there so much opposition to paying for something that we want to do? I'm new to this, and I'm sitting here from a common sense, perspective, is that when you do something, you pay for it. We've gotten into the fact that everything's an emergency, just so we don't have to worry about how we pay for it. And today people are telling me we have to worry about how we pay for it. I hear that every time I go home. And I have close to 1 million folks that live in my district. And we have high unemployment within 2 of the counties, extremely high unemployment.
Levin, I know there's a vote pending downstairs, but every member is entitled to ask you a question here. It looks like we may be reconvening based on the way things appear now.
Well,
so, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to come back after votes.
Please.
And because we still have questions here, I hope that it'll be relatively brief. And so the committee will stand in recess, and when we reconvene, we'll proceed with Mr. Nugent's questions. Yeah, at the beginning, we'll be here at the beginning of the last vote. The Rules Committee will reconvene. We were in the midst of questioning from Mr. Nugent. The chair recognizes Mr. Nugent.
Well, I don't see the chairman here.
Well, you've got the ranking member. You've also got, I'm here to listen to you.
Well, I appreciate it, but I do have a question for the chairman, so.
And then we will, the committee will continue to be in recess until Mr. Camp arrives. And Mr. Nugent is recognized for questions for Mr. Camp.
Well, thank you so very much for coming back. We appreciate that. The question, and you've heard this from members on the other side talking about how this is going to hurt seniors in particular. Do you have an answer to that?
Well, there is a transfer from the payroll tax reduction. Those dollars generally go into the Social Security Trust Fund. There will be a transfer from the general fund to make that whole, to hold that fund harmless. And then we're paying for this, so we're not adding to the deficit either. So this will be, seniors will be protected because there will be a transfer from the general fund, and then the program will be paid for.
Wasn't part
of the holiday.
Wasn't part of this in the President's deficit reduction plan in regards to the Medicare proposal on those wealthier individuals?
Yes, that's the President's proposal that wealthier seniors should pay more of their premiums. That occurs in this bill, and this really tracks the President's proposal on this.
So we've tracked in this bill a number of proposals that the President has laid out in a number of his speeches and calls on Congress to take certain action. Would that be true?
Well, certainly with regard to the extension of the payroll tax holiday, the President has been strongly supportive of that, and obviously in terms of greater contributions by seniors to their Medicare who are at high income, that is something the President is proposing. We're tracking his policy there as well.
And one last thing on the Keystone Pipeline. I know that's not within your jurisdiction, but the President had delayed action on that until after the election. I believe that's correct. And going back to the conversation that I talked about in regards to, when we're in Junction City, Kansas, and the folks are talking about the impact alone. And you may or may not be able to answer this because it's not your jurisdiction, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they were talking about an immediate 25,000 job creation, just the mere fact of the construction and not all the residuals as it relates to putting more people to work in refineries in Louisiana and Texas. Is that your...
Gentleman yield. I mean, I'd
Yes, sir.
be happy to. As Mr. Campbell said, it's not within his jurisdiction. First of all, let me just say that the petition for the Keystone XL pipeline was filed in 2008. You were asking when this was filed. It was 2008, and there are proposals that are before us that I believe, based on reports that I've seen, that would immediately create well in excess of 25,000 jobs. Those are numbers that have been thrown out there that it's actually beyond that number, just things that I have read. And I thank my friend for yielding.
And I thank the chairman for clarifying that, because that was, I think, a legitimate concern that we have in regards to creating jobs in America, and I'll yield back my time.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Mr. Camp, thank you for this, what I consider an appropriately named bill, the Middle Class Tax and Relief and Job Creation Bill. Let me ask you a couple questions, because there seems to be a misnomer out there on the left that somehow, some way, we've lost our direction on the right, that we are, in fact, the party of the middle class. And it seems to me that if you're looking for an opportunity to distill that fact, we found it in this bill. So, Mr. Camp, just make sure that I'm on the right page here, that the payroll tax that we seek to extend, in fact, has the greatest benefit to the middle class.
Yes, approximately 170 million workers will benefit from the tax holiday.
And when I think through the process of looking over the last several months, what I keep hearing from my friends on the left is this fixation and almost being enamored with the concept of tax increases. When I look through the last 2 years or 3 years of information, it seems to me that it's very clear that they've already taxed the middle class consistently and continuously, and yet we find ourselves in a position where through this payroll tax, we are extending a tax cut to the middle class. When I think about it, I think about the tax on innovating drug companies. That's going to increase taxes by about $22.2 billion. That will be passed on to the middle class. When I think about the tax on health insurers, $60 billion. That will be passed on to the middle class. When I think about the tax on health plans that the middle class have, that is another tax, $32 billion on the middle class. When I think about the surtax on investment income, $123 billion passed on to the middle class. When I think about a new tax, a 3.8% surtax on investment income, $250,000 and above, that's a tax on the middle class. When I think about the hike in Medicare payroll tax passed on, $86 billion to the middle class. When I think about taxing medical device, $20 billion. Taxes passed on to the middle class. When I think about the tax on indoor tanning, I'm not completely concerned about that one personally, but I will say that when I think about that, it's another tax, $2.7 billion on the middle class. But what I can't wrap my arms around is why, when I'm talking to a 57-year-old worker in Charleston, South Carolina, when she looks at the fact that she brings home $637 every 2 weeks, and she sees this payroll tax extension as an opportunity to see another 5% take-home pay almost. And she's 57 years old, so she's also concerned about Social Security and Medicare. And she sees to pay for it in our bill as an opportunity not only to see what is necessary today, but to survive 10 years from now on Social Security and Medicare. She says, thank you, because it's a part of the middle class. Not that middle class that doesn't exist somewhere in America, but the middle class that exists here. They see these 2 pages of tax increases as the antithesis to their existence. And I will say this, that without any question, our president has taken a positive step in the right direction when he says we must find a way to reduce unemployment by 20 weeks. We've gone one step further. We've said we're going to create an incentive for work. 59 weeks, more than 1 year of unemployment still stands at the end if this bill passes. That's a positive step, Mr. Chairman, in the right direction. I will say that if we're looking for peace of mind and consistency and certainty, we cannot deny the fact that the doc fix allows for a senior citizen to understand and appreciate the fact that their health care will be consistent, because docs will be reimbursed at a rate that allows them to continue to see senior citizens. But the National Health Care Plan takes $500 billion out of the pockets of our senior citizens. See, we are, in fact, talking about the middle class. Unfortunately, the other side is simply not listening.
Gentleman yields back.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Camp, thank you very much for being here. We very much appreciate it, and we look forward to considering your bill on the floor tomorrow. Our next witness is the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, and I saw Ms. Jackson Lee here. I would invite her to the table if she is planning to testify. So okay, well, please proceed, and without objection, your prepared remarks, Mr. Johnson, will appear in the record, and we'd welcome your summary.
Thank you, Chairman Breyer and Ranking Member Slaughter for allowing me to speak. H.R. 3630, the so-called Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act, would mandate that the President accelerate the approval of the Keystone XL pipeline. This pipeline will increase pollution in low-income and minority communities that are already suffering devastating health outcomes from dirty air. The State Department has submitted 2 failed environmental impact statements that do not include a satisfactory evaluation of the increased air pollution that will come as a result of this pipeline's operation. The raw tar sands crude that...
Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. The raw tar sands crude that would be transported through the Keystone XL pipeline is more toxic and acidic than other types of crude. There has not been a thorough study completed on how transport of tar sands crude would increase air pollution along the pipeline. It is highly troubling that the construction of the pipeline, which would transport 900,000 barrels of this crude daily, should take place before such a study is ever done. Communities surrounding the oil refineries that would be transporting raw tar sands crude through this proposed pipeline are already exposed to dirty air. Approval of the Keystone pipeline will only make it worse. In Port Arthur, Texas, where crude oil from this pipeline will be processed, over a quarter of the population is below the poverty line. High rates of asthma, respiratory disease, and cancer exist in the western part of the city where the most impoverished citizens live. We have a responsibility to the American people to properly assess what risks the construction of this pipeline may pose to their health. It would be irresponsible to sweep these concerns under the rug just to rush this project to the finish line as a political payoff for the Koch brothers. We are responsible to our nation's citizens to properly assess what risks the construction of this pipeline may pose to their health. For this reason, I'm requesting for a study to be completed on the health impacts of increased air pollution in communities surrounding the refineries that will transport diluted bitumen through the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. Air pollution knows no political boundaries. If you share my commitment to safeguarding Americans' health, I ask that you make my amendment in order that would allow for such a study to be done before we make any decision on the pipeline's construction. And I might add that the President would be commanded to approve this pipeline before it has even been sited, much less an opportunity to do an environmental impact study. You don't know where to do it until the thing is sited. With that, I will reserve the balance of any time that I might have.
Ms. Jackson-Lee.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much to the members of the Rules Committee. I understand that you have, in essence, held over for courtesies extended to us. I also recognize that we will not be in regular order and that amendments are questionable and probably non-expectant. But I believe this is such an important step that we're making this afternoon. As we were home in our districts, I cannot tell you the many people that have come up to us, and I imagine it has happened in districts no matter what their party affiliation. Just as a background, and then I will quickly go through the amendments that I propose in order to participate in regular order. I think you are well aware that if we do not pass the payroll tax, 400,000 jobs will be lost, 160 million people will be left without relief, and close to $1,400, between $1,000 and $1,400 will be denied to hardworking Americans. Then, of course, with the unemployment insurance, 3.2 million people have been pulled out of poverty by the existence of the unemployment insurance. If we do not extend it, 700,000 jobs will be lost. Let me associate myself with Mr. Levin and say that it is only accurate to declare the unemployment provision that he has offered as an emergency. It is an emergency. Lives are in jeopardy. 6 million people will not have the ability to pay rent or mortgage or food or the necessities of life. I don't know how we could stand against that. I support him as well, and my amendment joined with his, which was taking the Senate language on the payroll tax. That is one of the amendments, a surtax on the top 1%, which compares 300,000 with 160 million people for, my language had 2013 and for 10 years. But I joined with Mr. Levin on his language. And then the Medicare fix, I met with a group of doctors, joined them for a holiday fest, constituents of a hospital in my district, and these are individuals who serve poor patients, and they're dependent on Medicaid and Medicare, and I think it is reasonable to address the Medicare fix in the way that has been addressed on war savings. I know this has been controversial, but one of my amendments deals with carried interest and the question of the transfer of income to capital gains for some of our financial transactions, and I would offer that as a suggestion for deliberation when we're in regular order. I associate myself as well with Mr. Hastings. He offered a very thoughtful point about the Keystone Pipeline, and only in regular order, Mr. Hastings, I believe that we could come to some understanding of that particular view. One of my amendments would have stricken the issue of drug testing, not because I am pro-drugs, but I also know that drugs require treatment. Under current law, states are not allowed to deny workers unemployment insurance for reasons other than on-the-job misconduct, fraud, or earning too much money from part-time work. We are doing a major policy fix in non-regular order. It is noted that testing costs around $25,000. There are currently 15 million people going through the system as unemployment is granted in weekly increments. Where is the money coming to test persons for drug use? And how do we know these are not sick people? Currently, 9.8 million people are receiving unemployment insurance. Drug testing requirement is burdensome and onerous. What states who are now on the brink of bankruptcy are going to be able to afford that? It has come to my attention as well that this legislation may in fact increase the deficit and the debt, and I don't know whether we have an accurate assessment from the CBO to determine whether that is the case. I offer an amendment on behalf of myself, Representative Cleaver, and Representative Towns of the Congressional Black Caucus. This amendment will allow the Secretary of Labor to determine whether this bill will have a disproportionate impact on persons who are age 55 and over. Sound tax policy is grounded in the principles of equity, simplicity, and efficiency. The Congressional Budget Office estimates changes to Medicare under the Republican budget plan will triple the cost for new beneficiaries by 2030 and increase costs for recipients, current recipients, including 2.9 million people in Texas who received Medicare in 2010. This bill includes Medicare fixes, Medicare changes without regular order, and I can't imagine that we are not impacted negatively. My other amendment on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, I offered on behalf of myself, Representative Cleaver, and Representative Towns. This amendment, if we are out of regular order, the Urban Jobs Act would amend the Workforce Investment Act of 1998 to authorize the Secretary of Labor to make grants to the National Urban League for the purpose of operating an urban jobs program through local National Urban League affiliates. The National Urban League brings over 100 years of community-based experience. African American unemployment is double-digit, and proven success in delivering workforce development services, especially to underserved youth, are valuable. Rather than accusing young people who are poor of having no role models and that they should eliminate janitors from their work position and therefore do janitorial work, I think this would be more constructive. I heard an explanation from our good friend, the former speaker, on the fact that, or a statement rather, let me clarify, a statement in my newspaper, let me clarify, that indicated in the old days we used to have people working in grocery stores and working on lawns and et cetera, et cetera. And I will tell you, the children in our community want summer jobs. We did have a summer jobs program that was, in essence, eliminated in the last summer recess for these young people. I've worked in grocery stores. I've worked in the post office. I've done a number of jobs, and I believe that this amendment by the Congressional Black Caucus in the name of myself, Representative Cleaver, Representative Towns, will be constructive to legislation that now proceeds out of regular order. We must address the problem of unemployment for individuals 18 to 24 who are living in the urban areas. Mr. Chairman, let me just conclude in my remarks. I did this rather quickly, but I believe that we all have a commitment to doing the right thing, and I would argue vigorously that we are in trouble if we are to proceed with legislation that does not look holistically at this problem. Unemployment is a crisis, and I think we need to move accordingly.
Thank you very much for being here, and I thank both of you for being here. I have no questions. Mr. Sessions?
Mr. Chairman, I have no questions at this time for either of our participants.
I think they were pretty concise in their descriptions. I support your amendments and certainly hope that they will be made in order.
Mr. Bishop? Mr. McGovern?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First, can I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record a statement by Congressman John Lewis and two statements by Representative Bobby Scott?
Without objection, both statements will be included in the record.
And if I can say to my colleagues that I support their amendments, and, on the, we've heard a lot from the other side about pay-fors. It's interesting to note that no one's talking about paying for the Bush tax cuts. We're paying for the wars. I'm all for making sure that the Social Security Trust Fund is whole, but we should be able to come to some agreement, and this should have been a very easy thing for us to do. And the same with the unemployment insurance. And just one last thing on the Keystone XL thing. I agree with you, Mr. Johnson. I mean, there is a process in place, and for us, for whatever reason, to just say, the hell with the process, and, we're going to make these decisions regardless of the environmental impact and other things, I just think it's not good policy. So I support your amendments. I hope they're made in order.
Mr. McGovern, if I might say, as I recollect, let me not say that it's based on my memory, that Social Security is solvent pretty much to 2030, 2035. I'm concerned about Social Security as well. I don't believe in frightening seniors that this brief payroll tax cut would be in essence, death knell for Social Security. We're all fighters to preserve Social Security.
I agree with you. I just wish we'd have the same passion to try to offset Donald Trump's tax cut.
Mr. Woodall? Mr. Hastings? Mr. Nugent? Mr. Scott? Thank you both very much.
Thank you for your time.
That will conclude the hearing, and Chair will be in receipt of a motion.
Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 3630, the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2011, a closed rule. Rule provides 90 minutes of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking or a member on the Committee on Ways and Means. Rule waives all points for or against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment printed in the Rules Committee report shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points for or against provisions of the bill as amended. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instruction.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. Let me explain the rule. This, as has been the case under both Democratic and Republican majorities, a measure emerging from the Ways and Means Committee is considered under a closed rule process. As we all know, are nearing the end of the session, and in light of that, we need to move this measure to the Senate. We don't want to see the expiration of either the payroll tax holiday or the benefits for the those who are unemployed, and we, of course, want to put into place the job-creating opportunity for the Keystone Pipeline to proceed. Under this measure, under this rule, we will have 90 minutes of debate, and members will have an opportunity to offer an alternative through the motion to recommit, which, as members know, we were not always provided when we were in the minority ourselves. And with that, I'll see if there are any amendments to the rule.
I have an amendment, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thank you. Despite the fact that we have done this in the past under closed rule, because of the national interest in what we're doing here, and the great concern about people about whether they're going to be able to meet their financial obligations by counting on what we do here, I would like to move that we open rule, have
You've
rules so
heard
everybody has
you've heard the motion of the gentlewoman. The vote occurs in the Slaughter amendment. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No.
Roll call, please.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions? No. Mr. Sessions, no. Ms. Fox?
Yes. No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster? Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Chairman, no.
And the clerk report the total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
And the motion is not agreed to. And let me just explain that we do have the one, because of a typo that existed in the bill that was introduced on Friday, we do make an order, we self-execute the Camp Amendment, which is Amendment number 6 listed here. Are there any other amendments to the rule? Mr.
Yes,
McGovern.
may I?
I'm sorry.
If I may, because, again, the same reason I gave previously, of the incredible interest in what we're going to do here as to whether or not people will be able to stay in their homes and pay their bills, I would like to move that we change the debate time to 3 hours.
You've heard the motion.
I think that the importance of this bill requires that kind of.
As you know, we've actually, let me just say, I'd urge a no vote on this amendment in light of the fact that we've made a 50% increase in the what would have been the normal allotted time of an hour of debate. And clearly these are issues that have been and will continue to be discussed. We have other items, and so I'm going to encourage a no vote accepting 90 minutes of debate. By the way, I should say that that means that we will have 2.5 hours of debate because, of course, we'll have the hour of debate on this measure when considering the rule.
Could I respond to that,
Surely.
please, Mr. Chair? Given the fact that this is a closed rule, and again, I think it's one of the most important things we've taken up this year. The interest in it is really intense. That I would recommend a yes vote on this so that we can give people who are not going to have an opportunity to talk about their amendments at least a chance to speak on the bill.
Vote occurs in the Slaughter amendment. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those no. No. Sure the noes have it. The noes have it. Any further amendments, Mr. McGovern?
May I have a vote?
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't hear that request. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions?
No.
Mr. Sessions, no. Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? No. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster? Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk report the total.
3 yeas, 7
And
nays.
the motion is not agreed to. There are further amendments.
Yes,
Mr. Governor.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order and give the necessary waivers for an amendment in the nature of a substitute if offered by Mr. Levin of Michigan or his designee. And I would just urge my colleagues to vote yes on this. That's the one thing Mr. Levin requested. Again, this is a 369-page bill that was submitted, that was presented on Friday, that was referred to 12 out of 21 committees. There have been no hearings. There have been no markups. There's lots of changes, small and large, that are in this bill from some things that we have done previously. And again, this does everything from not just deal with the payroll tax and with the doc fix and with unemployment insurance, although I think they deal with unemployment insurance in an unfair way. But there are things here on the Clean Air Act and on TANF and a whole bunch of other things that I think deserve more attention. So at a minimum, I would hope that my colleagues would vote yes, allowing Mr. Levin the right to offer a substitute if he so chooses.
And let me just say that the gentleman will have that right under the motion to recommit, which will be made in order under this rule, which we have just provided here.
There is a difference between the motion to recommit and a substitute, and the gentleman from Michigan asked specifically for.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, let me just say that there will be an opportunity for the vote occurs on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No.
I ask for a roll call.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions.
No.
Mr. Sessions, no. Ms. Fox. No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Ms. Slaughter. Aye. Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings.
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
And the clerk report the total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
And the amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I
Mr.
do not have an
Hastings.
amendment, but I did ask for and request of you the time to address the subject that you and I had discussion regarding
Gentleman's
Keystone.
recognized. Sure.
In addition to that, you said, Mr. Chairman, that this measure emerged from the Ways and Means Committee. I guess it did, but when I asked Mr. Camp questions, he took exception to the fact that it came from his committee and said that he couldn't answer the question because it didn't come from his committee. So I guess it emerged mysteriously here. I tell you, what I said earlier applies. We either have deadlineophilia or deadline-itis around this place. The one good thing that you're doing, Mr. Chairman, is you are acting early in this week with the deadline. I just hope the Senate, which we all know is going to reject the measure, acts equally with the imperatives that are required.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I want to say to you that when you say something, you ought to really know what you're talking about.
Thank
at
you
the
very
time.
much for your advice.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And I have made statements in here, as I'm sure many members have, that when a correction is required, we come back and offer those corrections. You said to me that this was the same measure that passed the House of Representatives.
You're right.
I told you that it was not.
You were right.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that we understand the distinctions, and I appreciate the Chair. I'd like to introduce into the record the major provisions of H.R. 1938 and the distinctions as offered in 3630.
And without objection, that'll appear on the record. And
All right.
thank you very much for that, Mr. Hastings. Let me just respond to your advice. And I was told that they were identical. Let me just outline for the members of the committee the difference. The House passed Keystone, required the President of the United States to make a decision by November 1st. Senator Lugar, the provision which is included in here, says 60 days after enactment. There's a date change, November 1st to 60 days after enactment. Also, the House passed a bill that went through the Department of Energy. The Lugar measure, which is in this, goes through the Department of State. So those are the two differences. So I was wrong. I was wrong when I said, if I could complete my statement, thank you very much. I was wrong when I said that this was the identical to the House-passed provision. And the gentleman was right when he said that it wasn't. And I've just outlined these differences that are in the measure that Senator Lugar has offered here.
Mr. Chairman,
And I'm happy to recognize
Thank you.
my friend.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to prolong the matter, but there are more than two provisions that are different, and I won't bother to go into great detail in that regard.
The vote occurs on the motion of the gentleman from Dallas. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. May the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Sessions.
Aye.
Mr. Sessions, aye. Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Webster. Ms. Slaughter.
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Chairman,
And
aye.
the clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
And the motion is agreed to, and I'll be managing us on the floor for the majority, and Mr. McGovern for the minority. We are scheduled to meet at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. About 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We'll let you know if there's any time change. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.